Well, I'm Jay Davis, a Texan originally. I came to Madison as a graduate student 50 years ago in 1964 and worked with Heinz Barschall in fast neutron physics. Got a Ph.D. in '69, spent a couple of years here as a postdoc because that was a tough time to look for a job, and then went to the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory in Livermore, California, where I spent some 31 years in a succession of building accelerators, doing research, managing organizations, but my career had a very peculiar side note to it because I was part of the nuclear counterterrorism operation the country had. And so in 1991, on 4 days' notice, I was asked to go to Baghdad and be part of the UN inspections in the summer of 1991 in Iraq, which kind of pushed me out of my research career and into national security for the rest of my time. So I quite strangely ended up in Washington running a combat support agency for 3 years. Then retired, came out of retirement to run the Hertz Foundation, which gives graduate fellowships in applied science and engineering. So I'm sort of back where I started. Well, you asked what of my undergraduate and graduate experiences helped me get where I got. I think the metaphor I'd always used is that you keep putting things in your toolbox. And the deeper the toolbox, the more you're likely to be able to do. The story I always tell about my experiences in Iraq is I used my acting lessons for being a high school student. I quite unexpectedly used the good German I learned at the University of Texas because 10% of the Iraqis had been trained in German schools. I used the science and engineering I learned in Madison and some of the management skills I learned in Madison. And so I would sometimes shift my persona or shift the way I would deal with people, and all that adds up. I've heard a more interesting metaphor for it, which I like. It's called layering. Somebody said you build layers of expertise. So it's kind of hard to know what piece came uniquely from where when you get as far down the road as I did. The distinguishing characteristic of my time at Madison was learning things I didn't know I was learning. In addition to the physics and technology I learned in the nuclear physics lab, I was quite unaware of the fact that I was learning to manage and lead, because the nuclear physics lab here when I was a graduate student ran 24 hours a day, 362 days a year. And we did all the maintenance on the accelerator when it broke. So it turned out leading a crew of 25 people to do maintenance work teaches you a whole set of management skills. And I was quite surprised to look into other organizations and discover those skills weren't as well learned. The change I've noticed in my lifetime that's very, very different now is I think mobility is much higher among places of employment for the current generation. When I first went to the Livermore lab, if you worked in the classified program, you were stuck in the classified program forever because it was closed. If you took a postdoc, industry wasn't interested in you because you demonstrated you weren't interested in industry. Now I see 45-year-olds, 50-year-olds moving sideways between industry, academia, the national labs with much, much more freedom than was ever possible in the early half of my career. As part of being a member of the Chamber of Commerce in Livermore, whose board I headed for a year or two, we did a survey of what employers wanted. And it turned out more even than job-specific skills, they wanted the soft skills. Can you speak well? Can you write well? Would I be comfortable with you being alone with a customer? One of the interesting things we do in looking at candidates for Hertz Fellowships, which are very prestigious, they're a 5-year, $250,000 fellowship, it's the best graduate fellowship in the country, is we look at what are the language skills. Can this person communicate? Can this person write? Because we're looking for men and women that can lead and compel. And we don't add scores up. We don't add the GRE score to the SAT score and divide by the transcripts and stuff like that. But were we to do that, we would probably double the English GRE score and add it to the math score, which sounds interesting when you're picking scientists and engineers.